Have you ever seen the news that a famous celebrity lost everything? A billionaire's company collapsed. Or a coworker who always bragged finally made a huge mistake. And before you even realized it, a tiny part of you smiled. Not because you wanted to be a bad person, but because somehow it felt satisfying. Most people would never admit this out loud. We like to believe we're kind, compassionate, and supportive. We celebrate success. We encourage our friends. We want everyone to do well. At least, that's what we tell ourselves. But then, someone who always seemed too perfect suddenly fails. And instead of feeling sorry, we feel relief, sometimes even happiness. Psychologists have a name for this strange emotion. Schadenfreude, a German word that literally means joy from another person's misfortune. It sounds cruel, almost evil. But here's the surprising part. This emotion doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. In fact, it may be one of the oldest emotional programs your brain has inherited from thousands of generations of human evolution. To understand why, we need to travel back long before cities, governments, or even money existed. Back to a time when humans survived in small tribes. In those ancient communities, social status wasn't just about popularity. Status meant food, protection, mates, influence, and ultimately, survival. If someone climbed higher in the social hierarchy, they gained more resources. If you fell behind, your chances of surviving became smaller. Your brain evolved in that world. A world where comparing yourself to others wasn't insecurity. It was survival. That's why, even today, your brain constantly asks questions you never consciously think about. Who's stronger than me? Who's more successful? Who's more attractive? Who's gaining influence? This comparison happens automatically. Whether you're scrolling through social media, walking into a meeting, or attending a family gathering, your brain is quietly measuring your place. Most of the time, you don't even notice it's happening. Now imagine someone who always appears richer, smarter, more attractive, or more successful than you. Even if you don't dislike them, your brain may quietly register them as competition, not because you're jealous, but because your ancient survival system still treats status like a limited resource. Then one day, that person fails. Maybe they lose their job, their business collapses, they embarrass themselves online, or they simply make a mistake in front of everyone. Suddenly, the distance between you and them becomes smaller. Without doing anything, your relative position improves. Your brain notices, and for a brief moment, it rewards you, not because another human suffered, but because the competition appears weaker. From an evolutionary perspective, that could have increased your ancestors' chances of survival. Thousands of years ago, when one rival became less powerful, another member of the tribe gained opportunities, more food, more influence, more chances to reproduce. Your modern life has changed dramatically, but your brain still carries echoes of that ancient world. And that's where things become even more fascinating. Scientists have discovered that this feeling isn't just psychological, it's biological. Brain imaging studies have found that when people witness the failure of someone they envy, parts of the brain associated with reward can become more active. In other words, your brain may react to another person's setback in a way that's surprisingly similar to receiving a small reward yourself. Not because failure is objectively good, but because your brain interprets changes in social competition. It's almost like an internal scoreboard constantly updating. Who's ahead? Who's behind? Who's catching up? Who's falling? You never asked your brain to keep score. It simply does, automatically, every single day. And today, that ancient scoreboard has found the perfect playground: social media. Social media has changed something fundamental about human psychology. For almost all of human history, you only compared yourself with a few dozen people: your family, your neighbors, the members of your tribe. Today, you compare yourself with millions. Every swipe introduces someone richer, fitter, smarter, more successful, or seemingly happier than you. But here's the trick. You're not seeing reality. You're seeing everyone's highlight reel. Vacations without stress, success without failure, smiles without loneliness, achievements without the years of struggle behind them. Your brain, however, doesn't know the difference. It compares your real life to someone else's carefully edited version. and the gap feels enormous. The more that gap grows, the more psychological pressure builds beneath the surface. This is where Schadenfreude quietly becomes stronger, because when someone who looked perfect suddenly makes a mistake, the illusion breaks. The celebrity gets exposed. The influencer loses followers. The millionaire declares bankruptcy. The athlete misses the winning shot. For a moment, they become human again. And strangely, that makes us feel better about ourselves, not because we enjoy pain, but because the comparison suddenly feels fair. Psychologists call this downward social comparison. When we compare ourselves to someone doing worse than us, our self-esteem often gets a temporary boost. It's a mental shortcut, a quick way for the brain to reduce feelings of insecurity. The problem is, that boost doesn't last. Instead, it creates a cycle. You begin looking for more examples, more failures, more embarrassing moments, more people falling from the top. Suddenly, your attention shifts. Instead of celebrating growth, you become entertained by collapse. And the internet knows this. Think about how fast videos spread. When someone makes a public mistake, a CEO says something offensive, an influencer gets caught lying, a famous actor forgets their lines, a politician is humiliated during a debate. Within hours, millions of people are watching, commenting, sharing, laughing. Algorithms don't understand empathy. They understand engagement. And nothing captures human attention quite like conflict, outrage, and downfall. Because our brains evolved to notice changes in social status. Bad news travels fast because, for thousands of years, it mattered. If the strongest hunter got injured, everyone needed to know. If the tribe's leader lost power, that changed everything. Today, the stakes are different. But the mental machinery is remarkably similar. There's another surprising twist. We don't experience Schadenfreude equally toward everyone. Imagine two people lose their jobs. The first person is humble, kind, and generous. The second constantly insults others, boasts about their success, and treats people poorly. Whose failure feels more satisfying? For most people, the answer is obvious. Researchers have found that Schadenfreude becomes much stronger when we believe someone deserved their downfall. This is connected to our deep desire for fairness. Humans have an incredibly sensitive sense of justice. We dislike cheating. We dislike arrogance. We dislike people who gain unfair advantages. So when someone we perceive as arrogant finally fails, our brain often interprets it as balance being restored. Justice has been served. Whether that's actually true is another question entirely. Sometimes people fail because of their own choices. Sometimes they fail because of terrible luck. Sometimes we simply don't know the whole story. Yet our brains love simple narratives. Good versus bad. Winner versus loser. Hero versus villain. Reality is rarely that simple. But our psychology prefers certainty over complexity. And that's where Schadenfreude can quietly become dangerous. Because once we stop seeing people as human, it's much easier to enjoy their suffering. This is the point where a harmless emotion can become something much darker. It begins with a smile at someone else's mistake. Then comes the joke, the sarcastic comment, the repost, the pile of insults. Before long, thousands, sometimes millions of strangers are participating in the public humiliation of a single person online. This happens every day. One mistake, one awkward moment, one sentence taken out of context, and suddenly, an entire crowd is celebrating someone else's downfall. Psychologists call this de-individuation. When people become part of a crowd, they often feel less personally responsible for their actions. Empathy fades. Accountability weakens. Behaviors that would seem cruel in a face-to-face conversation suddenly feel acceptable behind a screen. Ironically, many of the people joining these online attacks believe they are standing on the side of justice. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they are simply feeding the same ancient instinct that once helped our ancestors compete for status. Our brains are remarkably good at disguising instinct as morality, and that's why understanding this emotion matters. Because the first feeling that appears in your mind isn't always a choice. Your brain is constantly generating automatic, emotional reactions based on millions of years of evolution. You don't choose your first impulse, but you do choose what happens next. You can pause. You can question it. You can ask yourself, am I enjoying this because it's truly fair? Or because it makes me feel temporarily superior? That single question changes everything. It transforms an unconscious reaction into a conscious decision. And here's something even more fascinating. Studies consistently show that people who practice empathy and compassion tend to experience greater long-term well-being than those who frequently compare themselves to others. Why? Because comparison has no finish line. There will always be someone richer, smarter, more attractive, more successful. If your happiness depends on someone else falling behind, you'll spend your life waiting for people to fail. But if your happiness comes from your own growth, someone else's success no longer threatens you. In fact, it can inspire you. Perhaps that's the greatest difference between the brain we inherited and the mind we choose to build. Our ancestors evolved to survive in small tribes competing for limited resources. We live in a world where cooperation often creates more opportunities than competition alone. The instincts remain, but so does our ability to rise above them. So the next time you catch yourself smiling at someone else's failure, don't rush to judge yourself. Instead, be curious, because that tiny emotion reveals something extraordinary, hidden beneath modern society, beneath smartphones, office jobs, and social media. Your ancient brain is still doing exactly what it was designed to do. The real question isn't whether that instinct exists. It almost certainly does. The real question is this: will you let your oldest instincts write your story, or will you choose something wiser? Because being human isn't about never having dark emotions. It's about recognizing them, understanding them, and deciding that they don't get the final word.